So over the weekend, I watched a video from Rebecca Watson, a great content creator I like watching from time to time. And in the video, she discussed regretful Trump voters who are currently in despair over his tariffs, or they were federal workers who had their jobs cut, or they're mad that the price of eggs have still not gone down. By the way, friendly reminder, the president alone cannot dictate how much groceries cost, but let me not harp on about that again. I've already talked about this to ad nauseum, and even made a whole video about this. And I don't feel bad for these voters at all. Throughout the campaign trail, Trump laid out his tariff policy very clearly, and it doesn't take more than a minute of research to know that the cost of tariffs are oftentimes passed off to the consumer in the form of higher prices because the importer doesn't want to hurt their bottom line and pay the tariffs themselves. And Trump also touted about cutting waste from the government, quote unquote, and surprise, surprise, cutting that waste includes cutting federal jobs. And when it comes to egg prices, that's on you for being so ignorant as to how the economy works that you think the minute a new president assumes office, prices magically go down. In spite of an epidemic heavily affecting livestock who produces those eggs that you buy. But anyway, back to Rebecca's video. The main reason why she doesn't feel bad for these voters and doesn't welcome them into the resistance, quote unquote, against Trump is because the reasons why they now regret voting Trump are very selfish. They didn't care about all of these negative policies that Trump championed on the campaign trail until it directly affected them. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. The apathy so many people have in this country. I am so sick of it. People tend to not give a shit at all what is going on to other people or in current events until they themselves are negatively impacted. COVID is a great example of this. We had a worldwide pandemic where we saw people dying of this virus left and right, and instead of actually coming together and ensuring that we protect ourselves and others as much as possible from said virus, instead many people, in this country especially, revolted against any measure to keep the public safe from this virus. Why do I have to wear a mask and socially distance? Who gives a shit if other people get the virus? I only care about what's convenient to me and me only. And of course, a lot of these same people refuse to take the vaccine because it supposedly contains microchips or whatever other stupid nonsense the vaccine doesn't actually contain. And it wasn't until a lot of these people caught the virus themselves when they realized, oh shit, this is actually serious. And in some instances, some of these people caught the virus so seriously that they ended up passing away. So when they realized how serious this virus actually is, it was already too late. So if a global pandemic wasn't enough to make people give a shit about their fellow humans, nothing will. We're so plagued by this idea that we always need to be individuals facing every problem head on with no community, when that's just not how this world works. We all share a country together, so whatever problems this country faces, we all ultimately have to face as well. But the way our society is designed promotes a toxic individualistic mindset, namely capitalism. We're hardwired to believe that your worth as a human can be boiled down to how many hours you put into your job, how big is your paycheck. Because the top 1% only want obedient workers who don't question their way of life so they can continue making all the profit and trickle down table scraps for the rest of us. And all of these talking heads that so many people think speak for them, who are oftentimes on the payroll of these billionaires, by the way, say shit like, well, if your life sucks, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just work harder, and you can also blame your problems on a trans person or an immigrant who merely comes to this country just to seek better opportunities. Apathy has captured our electorate hook, line, and sinker. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't believe every single Trump voter is a raging bigot. Many people voted for him because they thought he could just bring down grocery prices on a whim, or other similarly selfish reasons. And that in itself is still very problematic. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to justify their rationale for going with Trump. But the point I'm getting at here is that is exactly the problem with the electorate in this country. It doesn't matter if immigrants or LGBTQ plus people or other minority groups routinely targeted by Trump and the Republican Party as a whole are hurt. What matters most is there are no personal inconveniences to me because Trump promises to eradicate those inconveniences, so everything is okay. I don't know any trans people or immigrants, and I'm not a woman, so my bodily autonomy is not at risk, so how bad could a Trump presidency possibly be? Well, now a lot of these voters are realizing how bad a second Trump term can possibly be, now that their jobs are getting cut. cut, and their social security is possibly being tampered with. But it shouldn't take until you're personally impacted to realize how bad something can be. It's really disturbing how much a lot of people lack basic empathy. Going into the 2024 election, I knew exactly how bad a second Trump term would be for not only minority groups, but for this country as a whole. With him constantly talking about the tariffs he wishes to impose, but most of the voters who turned out on election day were willing to overlook that, willing to overlook the harm that would be imposed on minority groups in this country, willing to overlook that he would let Israel quote-unquote finish the job on Gaza, all because he said some words about lowering prices the minute he assumes office, and look, egg prices are still exorbitantly high. I just wish more people would care about their fellow human beings and not have this mindset of, well, I'm not part of this group of people, or I'm not part of this conflict that's going on in a completely different part of the world than I am, so why should I care? If my personal inconveniences are done away with, then that's all that matters to me. Well, guess what? Your personal inconveniences are still here. You might have even lost your job because the richest man in the world, who is currently illegally meddling in our government, thought it was quote-unquote waste. And you got conned by Trump. Again, what else can I really say to you besides you got what you voted for? You just thought that any negative consequence of which way you and most of the electorate went this past election cycle wouldn't happen to you. Well, guess what? Like I said before, we all share this country together, and if this country is negatively impacted, we all share the pain. Maybe if you and more voters had a smidge more compassion for your fellow human, you wouldn't have voted in a guy who ran almost exclusively on hatred, apathy, and division. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.